I don't understand how people don't understand how valuable this technology is, right? And whether it's Red 6 that delivers this technology or someone else, in my view, it is absolutely inevitable. And the sooner we think about that and these idea of that we now have these training environments that allow us to train scale, frequency, relevancy, manned and unmanned together, the better for everyone, because we don't have a solution that's viable right now. And if we did, I'd be all ears, but I don't see one.
All players, low down, active, bullseye, 1327. Post tactical. Lights on.
All right, we're live. Today we've got Dan Robinson, founder and CEO of Red 6, and we're here to talk about the intersection of AR, that's augmented reality, training, and generating high-end readiness in realistic threat environments. Red 6, if you guys weren't tracking, founded in 2018, I believe. Their flagship product is what we're here to talk about today. That's an AR helmet for pilots called ATARS, and that stands for Airborne Tactical Augmented Reality System. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Parker, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I've been watching Red 6, what you guys have been doing for many years. Lots of friends over on the team doing good stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to the opportunity here to actually dig a little bit. And I know a lot about it, but I hear it from your perspective on, starting at the beginning, how you got this idea and then really growing into like solving that problem where you guys are at today.
Well, it's good to meet you last time. I know you met my entire team except me. So finally we got to do it. So look, background, I flew on both sides of the ocean, right? I was in the RAF and then came to the US Air Force. And when I was teaching over in the UK, it sort of occurred to me even back then that we had a real scarcity of training, right? The ability to train frequently at scale against relevant threats was something we were really struggling with. And I just thought it was because we're the poor old Brits and we don't have any money and we're constantly band-aiding everything together, right? I came over here to fly and I thought all of my problems would be solved, particularly on the Raptor. And I realized pretty quickly there's actually the same problems over here as well, just at a different scale. We were struggling to train at to relevant platforms frequently enough and at the scale we need. And I wanted to do something about it. So that was really the genesis of the problem set. I fell in love with the States, became an American, did not go home to the UK and stayed over here and lived many lives since leaving the Air Force before I started Red 6. This is my second go around now as a CEO, having exited a previous company. But when I came to this sort of junction of, how do I want to think about the rest of my life and how do I want to spend my time? I kind of gave myself three real rules, I think. One was I'd only work on problems that I think are important to humanity, that I'm passionate about, and really that I'd only try to surround myself with people I love and whose sort of values are closely aligned to my own. And I sort of tried to rigidly adhere to that as we thought about building Red 6. So what did I love? What was I passionate about? And what did I think was important to humanity? I came back to this intersection of my love affair with aviation and training. I've been flying airplanes since I was 14 years old. And I started in 2017 asking myself the same questions I was asking myself when I was on exchange over here is, how do we think about training? Are we doing this the right way? And what is the current status? And certainly since I'd left the Air Force, the problem set had only gotten a whole bunch worse. So I spent about 6 months really sort of academically studying flying training. And at a very high level, I realized we had a growing divergence of supply and demand. Right? We had an increasing demand signal for a training solution and a chronic undersupply, which struck me as a problem that needed solving. And I figured that legacy approaches to it were failing, and they were going to fail continuing. As we move forward into the future, the definition of insanity, as far as I could tell, was repeating the same mistakes of the past, expecting different results. So the two ways that I looked at the industry were you either train real pilots in real airplanes against real pilots in real airplanes. We were failing at that for all the sort of reasons I've outlined. Difficult to scale, difficult to fly frequently enough and get the level of training we need, and certainly difficult to train against modern threats, particularly as we think about a focus on a peer adversary. And then I looked at sort of private red air contractors as a necessary but temporary band-aid at best, because they have the same problems: too expensive, you can't scale, it's not relevant, so on and so forth. But the best one in the world, we need them. They're providing a really important part of the jigsaw, but ultimately it was not a long-term sustainable solution I thought would solve the problem. On the other side, you had advanced simulation. And we all know as fighter pilots that simulation is good for certain things, repetition-based tasking, but there's nothing like getting air under your ass and, flying an airplane that will kill you in the blink of an eye, on your game. And so I think, while simulation is important and we recognize that it provides an overall part of the training solution, that was not a long-term solution either. So the central question that I really asked myself in 2017 was there a third way of doing this that no one was thinking about? And could I get the best of both worlds? And what I mean by that is the ability to fly live airplanes and experience all of the cognitive loads that we're under as human beings when we're doing that for real, but with all of the benefits of simulation. And so the central premise to the question we sort of challenged ourselves with was, could I make simulation work outdoors up in the sky? And if I could, then I could usher in an era where we basically have a magic wand and we're able to create whatever training environment we want outdoors at scale and frequency and to relevant threats, while still preserving our assets to fly, only flying blue air, not flying red air, and so on and so forth. So that was the sort of academic study and thesis that we came up with. I was lucky to meet the co-founder of the business, Glenn Snyder, in 2018. And Glenn had pulled off a world first in virtual reality. So he had taken two race cars, put them on two separate racetracks at the same time, put a driver into each of them, put them into a VR solution, so virtual, blind, entirely blind to the outside world, and had them race real race cars blind to the outside world from different locations. And the moment I saw that, really asked sort of two fundamental questions. Do we think we could do that in airplanes? Yes, technically more difficult. Okay, no one in their right mind is going to allow fighter pilots to fly around in virtual reality, although we'd probably love to have a go at it. So could we do that in augmented reality? And the distinction being, if you're not familiar, is that virtual is we're in an entirely virtual world. Augmented reality is a much more nuanced problem because we aim to put digital content into the real world around us and have it interact and behave in a manner commensurate with, in this instance, real pilots flying real airplanes. And so began my education in AR at the time. And Glenn explained to me that augmented reality as an industry, as a technology, didn't work outdoors or in dynamic environments at the time. And so when I talk about augmented reality, I'll draw the distinction between augmented reality and helmet-mounted queuing. They are not the same technology.
Oh, yeah.
So with augmented reality, we are aiming to mimic human vision, right? And the demands of human vision are extreme. Helmet-mounted queuing, which is putting targeting information in front of an individual. So when I think about augmented reality, I was comparing ourselves to like a Magic Leap or a Microsoft HoloLens product in the back. And fundamentally, they're all indoor solutions. And so that began the journey of Red 6. I had a test airplane, which I was building from the ground up at the time, which you've probably seen, more of the Bokoots flying around. And so Glenn and I got together with the early members of the team and started to focus our engineering efforts around one question: could we make AR work outdoors up in the sky? And if we could, then the vision that we'd sort of articulated in the academic paper was to be realized. And you started at the front of the podcast talking about, we are known for this product, ATARS, which is an AR helmet. It's actually not what we're building. At a headline figure, obviously we talk about augmented reality, and that's really important. But once we got that off the ground and we saw that technology work for the first time in 2019 in a really rudimentary way, we suspended a cube up in the skies of Southern California, and I took off in the airplane, and it was a really crappy prototype at the time, but we got to fly around a cube that was suspended and looked and felt like a three-dimensional object in space, which was awesome. But as soon as I saw that, my mind went to, okay, what does this mean? Because augmented reality is really just the portal through which we access these synthetic training worlds outdoors. It is what sits behind that sort of portal that is really what we're building internal to Red 6. And so the journey began, and Glenn and I got to work and started, obviously convincing people and banging the doors down of anyone that would listen that this is the way that we thought about training in the future. And it was built around a number of central tenets, but really anchored around the fact that we wanted to create a solution that was scalable, allow pilots to train frequently enough against any threat they want or any platform they want to fly alongside, in a way that was super affordable and realistically within the fiscal constraints of defense budgets. And so that was it. That was the creation of ATARS. AR is the headline technology, but it's really what sits behind that gives us the sort of canvas to customize and build anything from plot test training, basic formation, all the way up to large force engagements and everything else in between. So that was really the genesis story of how we are and compared to where we are today.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack there. When I look back, it's 2025. You flew the prototype in 2019, maybe a year and a half after you founded in 2018, and you flew
Mm.
the Raptor. But when did you leave the Raptor?
Oh, I left the Raptor in 2009. I didn't come back to this until 2017.
Probably off-road adventures between those two. we could skip the essence of time, but one of the things that was pretty clear to me in the early days of the Raptor, I first flew against the Raptor in probably 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
first when they were setting up OT, and I think I talked about it before on the show. And it became clear to me of like all of us have to fly red air against them to get their training. Like this is unsustainable and it's not scalable. And you probably saw maybe right after you left, they were regenerating old T-38s, the 1950s trainers, to be
Yep.
adversary squadrons, which are just radar reflectors, right? They don't have anything special in them. They're just radar reflectors for something for the Raptor to shoot. But that's definitely not high end training. It was trying to get the one to end training
Yep.
set, but today, guess what? We're still using the same thing. So,
Yeah.
you kind of I think part of the gem takeaway of that, Dan, is that you have these pain points, you kind of skate where the puck's going to be in this case. Like, hey, 10 years from now, do we really think we're going to be doing the same thing? And some of these are, long burn type of technical challenges like you guys have been working through, where I think now they go back to the red air side, even though they have organic T-38 support, I think there's still like 120,000 hour or 120,000 sorties a year
Mhm.
requirement to generate just to get high end training. And that's just unaffordable, right? I think the Air Force funds like less than half of that right now. It just can't afford it.
Yep.
So this is one of those like, what else can we do? Is there another option? And I think that goes back to like, how do I solve this pain point in a way that's scalable and preserves a little bit of that element of security, where I can fly around where no one really knows what's going on outside of like physically. When you look at the physical environment, you
Sure.
can't really see what you're actually doing to an outsider who might be trying to look at you.
Yeah, that's right. And really, as you know, I kind of I really know my engineers when I say this, but the augmented reality is interesting, and don't get me wrong, it's a very unique technology and really important. But it's the enabling technology. But once you step through that portal, now it's like we're actually creating virtual airspace, right? So the value propositions of what we're doing here is we're no longer limited by range space, right? So for advanced missiles, be it AIM-260, long range missile shots, we don't have the infrastructure and the range space to support it. Well, now we don't need it because I can put a Comet Patrol of J-20s over the White House if I want and start my intercept there if I want. As long as I meet in the whiskey 386s out there, it doesn't matter. So we're creating that virtual airspace and ability to train a range. And one of the things that people often get wrapped around the axle with, it's like anything else when you bring something new into the world, right? There'll be like 99 people that tell you why you can't do this and why this isn't important, and you look for the one that gets it. A lot of the sort of questions we've had over the years are, is within visual range training even relevant? Do we need to be able to see the threats? And I'd argue all day long that, absolutely we do. Air dominance is not our preordained natural right. And the idea of long range kill chains is obviously important. But I think I forget which general it was that said me, it's not a question of you going to the merge, as the merge will come to you in a highly contested high end fight, and you better be ready. But to focus on the within visual range piece of what we've done is actually to miss the point. And this is not a within visual range tool at all. It is a beyond visual range tool that allows you to transition within visual range in synthetic environments. And so some of the stuff we're doing right now, where we're out there in mix of live and blended wingman, we're doing really long range targeting, solving long range targeting problems where we're taking shots and now really cool stuff that you wouldn't even think to. We previously trained, you actually see missiles coming off your airplane. You see the smoke trails, you see them go up to the cons and beyond. You can watch them time out and you can see in the distance, like if they get there, right, you don't have to question the PK of an airman. You see if you see if it times out or not, and if it doesn't, you got to go do something about it. So there's this whole massive beyond visual range aspect of what it is we're building, anchored in the idea that we're creating virtual airspace and virtual worlds. And so, Rebel and I, is the other test pilot here in the company, is we have just as much fun, spend way more time in the beyond visual range environment working on tactics and stuff than we do within visual range. But it does everything in between. So as you transition now, you're able to go to the merge and look out of the window and see a J-20 or a J-36 and go fight it. So it's a really, really important technology that, and you alluded to it as well, allows us to train scale, frequency, relevancy, but securely as well. Because it's probably the same for you. There's like windows of opportunity where we go out and train the Northern Rangers at Nellis or wherever. There's maybe a few minutes a day where we're free from prying eyes. You can't train, and now it just looks like a bunch of lunatics up in the sky boring holes, and because they're not seeing you maneuver in relation to anything. You now have suddenly a secure training environment outdoors that solves the airspace limitations as well. So there's a really big value proposition here to the technology.
Flashbacks of like flying in LFEs or like Red Flag, and they're all Nerf missiles, and people are keying their mic and calling shots, and they have all the the training systems are all doing their thing. But in real life, like that missile is coming off the rail and it's going on a upward trajectory. So if you're shooting in like block 2 and there's a block 3 guy in front of you, like there's all kinds of deconfliction, like flight path deconfliction, and we kind of like had a clear field of fire, but you don't really know, right? Because you can't really tell which way the missile's going. You see your fly out on a 2-dimensional screen on the radar, but you can't really see. So I think that just for that gives you a good sense of a little more perspective. It's like when you go shoot, you ever go to like Archer and you shoot your first live missile and it comes off, you're like, wow, that is totally not what I thought it was going to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And dare I say it, I mean, certainly for us as 5th gen guys and beyond, we get so consumed by heads down now, and building situational awareness by looking heads down. It really didn't occur to me when I started Red 6 now, but the level of situational awareness we now have by just watching missiles timing out or not, and then having to go do something about it, rather than just being down here, these habit patterns of being heads down inside the cockpit. Now we're actually looking out and we're gleaning this situational awareness in a BVR context, and it's really, really important and valuable. And just the other day, I mean, stuff happens in software all the time, but I took an AMRAAM shot. I was going bonsai into a merge, and it came off with a stab lock, and the AMRAAM just sort of tumbled. I said stab lock is probably a bug in our software somewhere, but the point is that's going to happen, right? You got to go do something for real about it. So it's really, really valuable training, and it is far from a within visual range tool. Although we get to do that, and all the building blocks of producing pilots all the way up to the high-end fights and everything in between. It's all encompassing.
Yeah, one of the things I always thought was interesting, we're talking air to air. The surface to air is equally, I think, interesting to me. We talk about like surface to air missiles, and you fly out trails and all that, that's pretty evident. Like, hey, there's a missile in the air, you can see it. And most of these missiles, smoke pretty good. But 80 to 85% of all combat losses in the past 60 years now are AAA, right? What's the one thing we can't train against? AAA. There's no one shooting guns at you on the Nellis range, with tracers, so there's no way to really replicate that. So maybe that's another opportunity, that's out there where you can see like muzzle flashes, tracers.
Yeah, it's huge. When Rebel joined us, he was the barnyard commander for the F-22 squadron at Nellis there. And he would talk to it all the time. That when he saw that in just the early prototypes of Red 6, he was like, that is what convinced me that this was the answer to training. Because even now we are telling pilots to imagine there's a surface threat out there, and you might get a tick along a sensor or something like that, and you look out and you might get a little puff of smoke or anything like that. But we don't train that sort of habit pattern of looking out of the cockpit, seeing a line of sight rate, assessing whether you're being tracked or if it's going into lag, whatever it is, and then defending and maneuvering against these threats. We're doing it every single day of the week now, and it's kind of frightening. As some of the LFEs that we're flying in ATARS, you're working your way towards a target, and you realize the severity and the complexity of that surface to air laydown. When you see them actually coming up at you, the workload is significant, but it's training you once again to get your eyes out of the cockpit and see what's coming up at you. So I really state this with all seriousness. This technology is going to save lives, because you rightly pointed out that's the threat. And eyes out of the cockpit is a good thing.
One of the interesting things I remember back in the day training like threat reactions, like surface area threat reactions, and you'd know like that's a SA, you name it, and like and because you know about the threat, like, oh well, that's got a pronav flyout, which means it has zero line of sight. And so if I have a jamming system and I'm jamming that threat and that missile's in the air, it's going to mess up the pronav guidance. So I should see like line of sight aft and things like so things that will compel you to want to look outside because how do I know my electronic warfare kit's working? Like I have to go see if it's having an effect. And I've been looking outside, right?
That's right. I mean, you stitch all of that stuff together now, you're getting like an overall comprehensive training view. And what's interesting, we're talking about an isolation of am I targeted? But the other aspect of it is, you're flying around in formation is your wingman targeted? Are they seeing it? And it's quite amusing to be flying alongside of one of the test pilots and just going, you know what, I can target. And you shoot a SAM at your buddy, see if he reacts without telling him. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
That's awesome. So if you want, we could dig a little bit into the helmet itself, but I think you want to talk about kind of bigger picture of where you guys are going as a company. You started off on your internal company aircraft, and then I saw probably a year and a half ago, you got a contract for T-38s. That was that a TACFI or StratFi?
I think it was a combination of, I think it was actually a different contract vehicle to the TACFI
okay.
and StratFi. The StratFi, I believe we are working StratFi with Air Force Special Operations Command on a project for them.
Oh, well, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, we've had a number of contract vehicles, and certainly the T-38 work has been really, really valuable for us as we start to sort of put this through the paces of internal aircraft development here at Red 6 into actual platforms. And so we've been working with the test group down at Holloman there, and they've been world class to deal with, and just going through the natural pain points and ups and downs of technology maturation with them, and garnering feedback and working into the next sort of iteration of the technology has been absolutely fantastic and really, really valuable for us. So it's been a great partnership with those guys.
That's a really important thing to highlight. Most people, traditional defense, I worked in flight tests my last few years in an operational test. And there was kind of like a running joke, but it was like an understanding, like nothing that shows up for a test is going to work, which is okay. Like the whole point of it is like, you want to give feedback and iterate, but when it's expected to show up and work and it doesn't work, that's where, everything gets a bad rap. But in your case, like you have this environment that you're innovating through iteration and adaptation based on that feedback cycle. So, hey, I like this, I don't like that, and allows you that opportunity space to mature the solution alongside the end user versus throw it over the fence. Here you go. Here's my check.
Without a doubt. I mean, to your point, I mean, I was flying Raptors in 2006 when it just started becoming operational on the 27th of Langley. There wasn't a day I didn't fly that airplane where I had to do some sort of reset because something didn't work. Right? And that airplane was operational. It's just completely normal. So I think we need to sort of really get our mindset out of this, things breaking and not working is a bad thing. I think, what I certainly encourage my team to do is like celebrate the failures, put them right quickly, and iterate. So fail fast, move on, and continue to innovate and keep striving and separate the sort of signal from the noise, because bringing a new technology to bear is really hard, and there's inevitable ups and downs and all that kind of stuff, but that's all right. It's supposed to be that way. And so, the guys we've been working with inside the Air Force have been excellent in terms of providing us feedback. And my team has just been really rapid to sort of be responsive, get solutions worked back into the aircraft, even within the next day. And, be that level of responsiveness to back to the customer is really important for us. And with the best will in the world, we have a good idea of what we think right looks like inside of Red 6, but getting it in the hands of end users and getting feedback is really important. They've added a tremendous amount of value to the product and how we're maturating it.
I've been following Red 6 for a long time. If you go back and look at the, history archives of the internet or just Red 6 image search, you can see the product iteration in different, photos and different versions and styles of helmets over time, based on what's on the website now, which is, a real kick-ass looking picture. Yeah. And that helmet shell is even different. It looks like a lift helmet from like Next Gen Fixed Wing helmet program.
Yeah, so we are helmet agnostic, right? And deliberately so. So we love all helmet providers. It's the
I love them
tagline.
all equally.
We
It's a
love
good strategy.
all equally. But yeah, look, generally the stuff you'll see online or anything, even in test, by the time it's going to test and everything, it's a year or 2 years old, out of date anyway. So where we are internal to the company is well beyond that, which we show publicly. But it's moving really quickly. And augmented reality, as I said, until we came along, it didn't work outdoors, and it certainly didn't work outdoors in the sort of dynamic environments we're in. So it is a really, really very different technology to queuing, and there's been a lot of lessons learned along the way to get us to where we are right now.
It's really hard unless you've lived it to really appreciate the challenges. You're just I'm going to run through a couple of them just from the top of my head. And again, you're living this. I'm just a tourist here.
Yeah.
But so you have number one, you're going to bring augmented reality from inside to outside, which is like,
Mhm.
that's really hard. Then you're going
Yeah.
to put it in a vehicle that is moving very, very dynamically, both in acceleration, speed, altitude, G forces, and you're going to make it basically space stabilized. So you have to fly dynamically and something has to basically be stabilized in relationship to you moving so fast.
Hmm.
Then you have to combine the environmentals. So you have sun glint, things like that. The pulling G's and the helmet moves, and you pull 9 G's with the helmet, it's gonna move a little bit, or looking
Yep.
left or right, and for neck movement versus eye movement. Like, these are like tons and tons and tons of end user dynamics that you have to consider that just all kind of stack on top of each other. So it's just putting augmented reality like inside the outside is like, that's like 1 inch of I think the entire problem set that you're solving from a hardware perspective, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Trust me, when we started the company, we did not intend to go build AR optical systems as well, right? I thought we'd just go get something, we'd plug it into an ecosystem and we'd be good and we'd have the solution done. But turns out it's really hard to do AR outside. So we had to build it from the ground up. And the good thing about that is it's really forced us to think through the problem at a very deep technical level. And we've developed a really comprehensive portfolio of technology and patents around it as well, which is really good. But it also allowed us to focus on every single engineering effort we had around one specific problem set. I mean, there's a number of subsets to that problem making it work, but ultimately we've got to create the suspension of disbelief, right? So the notion that you're up there and there's another object you're acting in relationship to, and you are absorbed so much in the problem set that you're faced with that you believe you are there and doing the job for real. And I always like to, whenever I'm still even after all these years, I'm still a test pilot inside the company, but I always like to, put someone in the back, go up there and fly alongside an aircraft. And maybe let's say it's a tanker or whatever it might be in close formation. And one of the experiments I do is I will put closure on a real aircraft to the augmented aircraft, and you will react in the back seat. It does not feel comfortable. And that is called the suspension of disbelief. And getting to that point where you actually think there is something out there is a difficult journey. But once you get it, you come down from those sorties and you go, wow, what I've just trained against, and none of it existed. But your mind
Yeah.
is right in there. You're doing the tactics, you're doing everything. And so then you start talking about the margins of, this isn't perfect and this isn't perfect. And you kind of go to yourself, well, hang on, stop for a second. It's really easy to lose the point, right? We're talking about, again, the natural pathway of technology maturation, but you're talking about something that doesn't exist. And if you're talking about something that doesn't exist, then we're winning, right? Because this technology is, in my view, absolutely inevitable. It's coming. Whether it's Red 6 delivers it or not, it's coming.
Yeah, well said. And I definitely appreciate the suspension of disbelief. Like, you get fully immersed in the scenario. Like, there's the saying, like, don't fight the scenario
Yeah.
and training. And it's, when you have like a really good DMOs and they link all the simulators together, you can do these big like red flag things in the sim. And some of them get like really, really good. Like, an hour goes by and you're just fully immersed in the scenario.
Yeah.
And you forget you're at 1G 0 knots, like in a tub, inside of a building. But you think, like, for that 30, 45 minutes, you are in a scenario, interacting with other people in the scenario that are interacting with things that aren't even real. Right.
Yeah, without a doubt. And well, actually, to that point, I mean, I think it was Freak Morsko coined the phrase. You'll remember the ACS, right, from the Raptor days. is basically the ACS in the sky. That's how we think about it. I mean, you are literally customizing and creating full-on LFE engagements up in the sky from beyond visual range to within visual range. And trust me, you're immersed. Like the level of training we're getting is unlike anything we've ever had before. Rebel, I talked about him earlier on. He's a part-time reservist F-35 guy now, former Barnyard commander for the Raptor. They just came back from the Red Flag in Alaska, and they deployed, and they had to take their own Red Air with them. So they were indigenously supporting themselves with Red Air. So you're deploying, you're incurring all of that expense, and you're taking your own Red Air with you to do it. It doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Whereas you can take off in your location at Eglin or Tyndall or wherever it might be, go out of the airspace and pick a theater and train with as many platforms as you want on your side against whatever it is you want at any scale on the other side locally. It's enormously valuable.
You mentioned it once or twice earlier when you were talking about, hey, this is not the same as a helmet mounted queuing system. And I want to use that to dovetail into the thing that caught my attention about a month ago now. The announcement that Red 6 is integrating into an F-16 environment. And number one, that's awesome. Congratulations. But
thank you.
What I really think is important is that, the F-16, you would not be replacing a normal helmet. You would be replacing a helmet mounted queuing system helmet, which means that you'd have to bring something that is, on a replacement level of what exists currently, not just take a dumb helmet and turn it into an augmented reality environment, right?
Yeah, for sure. And therein lies the nuance of what we're building, right? So I will state it like this. The byproduct of doing augmented reality well is that you can do helmet mounted queuing to a standard that is orders of magnitude of anything out there right now, because we are, again, with AR, we're aiming to mimic human vision, right? And that's and create that suspension of disbelief. So the byproduct of that in terms of field of view, brightness, resolution, all the stuff you'd associate with that, being able to trick your brain into thinking there's something out there, ushers in a new era of what we previously thought was imaginable in terms of next generation queuing systems as well. And so I can think about, and we talk about, you ever seen the movie or read the book Ender's Game? So that was really the inspiration for Red 6, right? And the idea that Ender Wiggin at the end of that movie, he thinks he's in a simulated environment, and he goes out and he eradicates the species of aliens, whatever it is. And then the mic drop moment is, oh, he's actually done it for real. That was really the genesis behind the inspiration for Red 6, in that if we get this right, this same product that you wear for training, it gives you access to all of these training environments. It also happens to do all of the queuing stuff that you would be used to in sort of legacy providers, but to a far higher standard. And it's also the same helmet you would use from an operational perspective as well. So, I think through what it is we're doing, and it poses some very interesting questions for the industry. And the F-16 announcement was, of course, significant and did, garner a lot of attention, because the obvious question is, what does that mean for queuing systems as well? And we need to be honest about that.
Yeah, that's not a small market. It's the same helmet that's used on the F-16s, used on the F-15 and the F-18s. So it's you're going from a training environment to now becoming an operational capability that you can also use to train, which I think is a step function difference in where you guys are going. So that was the first thing that jumped out at me when I saw the press release.
No, it's the first thing that jumped out a lot of people. But in my mind, it was obvious. I'm sort of surprised. It really caught people by surprise. Again, the byproduct of AR is you can do helmet mounted queuing. The inverse does not apply. You cannot do helmet mounted queuing and then call it an AR solution. It's just not the same technology. So it's a really interesting position to be in, and we're really excited about the F-16 work and that which lies beyond that as well. So let's see. Watch this space.
Yeah. I want to go back and ask something I should have asked you probably 20 minutes ago when you started the company. Red 6, what was your inspiration for the name?
I get that so many times. What's your guess?
I mean, it's red air at your 6 o'clock. And so you want to look outside, check 6,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So people often ask me if it was a Star Wars reference and stuff. So red, yeah, certainly the red air for sure. The six was an interesting one. It was actually to do with the first patent that we ever filed and were awarded. And the idea was I was kind of looking at this through the prism of like a former Brit, now an American, but loved both countries and always lamented that we weren't as close as we perhaps could have been, even despite our cooperation. And I really didn't want the UK to be sort of left behind the US in terms of this technology. So I had this vision, much like I articulated in the race cars, where someone in their Eurofighter in the UK takes off and goes to their airspace, and someone in the US takes off in their Raptor and goes to their airspace, and they drop down into the system and they could meet each other in a common piece of virtual airspace and train either alongside each other or against each other. And we called that the sixth dimension. So that was sort of the genesis of the name. And I think much like most of my best ideas, it came to me at 2 a.m. just outside of Nellis Air Force Base in a cab on our way to Vegas, something like that, with a bunch of folks. So I remember the moment it was invented, but that's that was it. So red F, and then six was the sixth dimension.
Maybe even after a drink at the T5 Club late at night when it was still there.
Possibly.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Brits, memory's a little hazy now, but probably a year and a half ago, you guys were doing some integration with the RAF too, right? With the Hawks.
Yeah, we did. We have a great relationship with the Brits, so we put it into the.
I mean, I would expect you to, right? I'd be disappointed if you didn't.
Yeah, you never know. They've been great, and they're moving really quickly, and it's been fantastic actually. I obviously had a number of relationships back there and connected my team into there, and they've gone at their own relationships now, which is fantastic. But yeah, you're quite right. I mean, look, first of all, go back to the problem. What is the problem? We talk about training at a high level, but there are three real subsets of training that we can think through, right? There's the production problem, there's the absorption problem, and then there's the experiencing problem as well. And so, we got the whole gambit of this when the idea was to kind of create virtual worlds outside. We can do everything from the LFE, beyond visual range flights, all the way down to close formation and everything in between, right? And even some other really cool stuff around the visualization of airspace and the likes. But the UK, the problems we have in the US and the UK are really acutely defined systemic problems that we're struggling to solve. The Hawk fleet is decimated by a lack of availability, largely driven through the performance of the engines in the airplane. And so the Brits have had the same problems you've had here. They've had real problems putting people through the production pipeline and getting them onto the front lines. I mean, to the point where we're outsourcing flying training overseas, and the UK, once had widely held, one of the best flying training systems in the world. And so they looked at the technology and really wanted to study, what it means in terms of integration into not just the platform, the whole platform, but thinking about it as a broader ecosystem of an approach to training. So you're quite right. We integrated into the Hawk. They then went through the strategic defense review in the UK. And I think the decision was made to divest of the Hawk. And so we watch with interest as to which platform they choose as its replacement. But I would say we obviously work direct to customer, but we also work with the OEMs as well. And we have really good relationships with all of the would-be providers of what would be likely the potential replacement aircraft for the Hawk over in the UK. So we're well positioned there. We're very close to the UK, and actually we're in talks right now for follow-on engagements.
That's great. We've been talking about manned things the whole time, training and readiness for the high-end fight for the manned things. I think you and I are pretty well aligned, but like the future has unmanned aircraft in it, but it's not a either or, it's an and.
Yes.
So, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. If you're looking at building this augmented reality environment, what do you think about manned and unmanned aircraft?
It is probably the most important question. So first of all, I aim to separate the signal from the noise. And I thought about this a length over the years around manned, unmanned platform. I think once you remove the hysteria and you get rid of the rhetoric, I think we can both take a really objective, sensible view that the days of manned fighters are going to be around for a very, very long time. So that's not to say that the future force structure is not going to be changed by the advent of unmanned platforms. For sure, that's the case. But it's not, are they going to replace manned cockpits anytime soon? I don't think anyone that's sensible about the high-end fight thinks that that is a reality in the near future at all. So if that is the case, and you put the hysteria to one side, you really start to say, well, okay, what does that mean? And the real question in my mind has always been, how do we think about manned and unmanned platforms working alongside each other to derive synergistic warfighting effects? AI is very good at some things, it's not so good at other things. Manned platforms have strengths as well. Obviously, there's areas where AI may be better. So if we can sort of step back and think through that, then what I asked myself very early on in Red 6, and as the advent of manned platforms became more and more prevalent, was, okay, what does that mean? And I tried to put my thinking beyond just unmanned platforms are going to take over. So if manned platforms and unmanned platforms are going to be a combined part of the future force structure, for human beings and machines to work together, we need to be able to develop trust and predictability and develop concepts and tactics, techniques, and procedures, and so on and so forth. So you go, okay, all right. So human beings are going to be in the loop. Therefore, how do we think about training? Well, you go back to what is an unmanned platform. Sure, it's a, be careful what I say, but it's a composite or a chunk of aluminum, right? And it's basically an airplane. But sitting at the heart of that is an AI algorithm. I think what we've given a tremendous amount of thought to is the operational use cases for unmanned platforms and where we envision this going to in the future. I think where we've been less effective is thinking through how we are going to train at the scale, at the frequency, and against and alongside the relevant platforms, whatever they are, manned and unmanned. So back to what's an unmanned platform? Sure, it's a chunk of aluminum composite with an AI algorithm. Or what's an amazing way to train at the scale, frequency, and relevancy you need in a risk-free environment before you even get into the regulatory challenges of flying a bunch of unmanned platforms around as well. Well, you do that in this very same synthetic worlds. So actually, the ATARS ecosystem that we've created and built is very deliberately positioned as a training environment that allows humans and machines to train together every single day of the week at the scale we need and develop tactics, techniques, and procedures in a largely risk-free environment. There's nothing bump into, go wrong, right? In a secure environment at relevant ranges, because we're solving for the range space limitations that we have. And so we're already doing that inside of ATARS right now, where the test pilots here will pick an unmanned platform and an AI algorithm will go fly alongside it and weave it into how we're thinking about operating and training alongside them. So I think the advent of unmanned platforms certainly will alter the future force structure, but I actually think it increases the case for an ATARS solution and the ability to train to the levels we need to be able to build trust and predictability in teaming. So that's how we're thinking through it. And I'm pretty certain that our thesis is correct.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this too, and I completely agree with everything you said. The Air Force has said, don't expect to fly these CCAs, on a daily basis. It's not the same type of ops tempo whatsoever. So the key question is, if it's manned and unmanned teaming, and the unmanned things aren't going to fly every day, and the manned things are, how do you augment that, right? So there's sims, and sims have limitations, but the augmented reality bringing that is a really interesting opportunity space that maybe is being pulled left by this acceleration of the CCAs of like, oh, this augmented reality can do other things that are even more compelling in the fact of like generating high-end readiness and not just kind of basic training.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, the naysayers will leap to, well, they're not going to be within visual range. Why do you need augmented reality? It's to fundamentally miss the point, right? You're creating virtual game space outdoors, and you can train absolutely in the BVR environment and within visual range environment. And in the same way we look at things of, or we develop sort of concepts and we're targeting our wingman, we can think about how do we think about targeting CCAs? And I really mean this, the amount of SA you have now to just look out of the window, having, let's say, targeted an unmanned platform, and maybe it's taken a shot into a group, but the ability to look out and see the missile leave its rail and loft and realize that it is doing what you've asked it to do, builds that overall sort of ecosystem level picture and situational awareness. And then obviously you get to the within visual range aspects of it as well. And, this is not something we're imagining. This is something we're doing on a daily basis. And we're developing and building a tremendous amount of data to support things like how we think through ConOps and how's the best way to interact with these same AI algorithms. To your point, I think you're on the money. We're not going to have enough of them. We're not going to want to pull them out of the box. We're not going to want to beat them up in the same way we don't with air-to-air missiles. The idea is you keep them in the box until you need them. Maybe you pull them out once or twice a year for a high-end ME or something like that, but you train for the same AI every day of the week in the synthetic environment, and that's a beautiful thing.
And what's really interesting is if you have these CCAs with an AI pilot, I mean, it's a digital twin of the thing, wrapped in aluminum, like you said earlier. It just happens to be in a different virtual environment. And that digital thread probably goes all the way down to the sim. And so the same thing that you fly in the sim is the same thing you fly in AR in the air, which is the same thing that a couple times a year you get together and put all these things in the airspace together. And it's not a surprise. On that note, one of the things I think is really interesting about the promise of AR, and just one thing to go into the sim and, 1G and 0 knots, you're suspending disbelief, if you will. Remember that? Yeah, in the sim, sometimes you get a little more risky with things because you kind of understand you're in the sim. Yeah. And if you're controlling, 2, 3, or 4 of these CCAs and you're a Raptor in the sim, you're probably going to react differently just from a cognitive burden, self-preservation, that if you're live flying around with these in augmented reality, trying to manage the exact same scenario, your weight on wheels switch, you get in the air and your IQ just goes down. It's one of those life's mysteries I think everyone can appreciate. Yeah. So being able to do it in augmented reality really validates your training, your preparedness, and the ability and viability of those tactics that you're generating, right?
So that's exactly it. Look, you and I know it's not the same being in the sim as it is being in the air, right? You don't think the same. The human brain doesn't work the same. And I've used to joke, I put my helmet on and I'd lose 50% of my capacity. I'd close the canopy and the other 50% was gone. So it's really important that we fly for real. I don't think anyone is disputing that. Anyone that's serious about this business, we accept that we have to fly. The question is, how do we fly efficiently within a finite amount of resource and get relevant training to the folks out there that are going to do their job for real? And they deserve every single day of the week. And then thinking about the unmanned construct, how do we layer that into a part of the overall training solution? You also scratched at the surface of something that I think is critically important and really perhaps the overall value proposition for what it is we're building in this sort of ecosystem approach. We touched upon it in sort of the ender's game thing, but by virtue of the accuracy of the solution we've had to build to suspend your disbelief, right? It allows us to extract really unique data sets as well from the individuals that are operating to inform decisions as fundamental as why human beings make the decisions they make when they're under duress. Did the individual perceive the problem correctly? If they did they select the right course of action? And if they did, was an execution error? Inevitably, there's a degree of subjectivity in that, right? When you think about sort of parsing that apart as an instructor pilot. Did you have SA when you made this decision? Joe Smith. Yeah, yes, of course I did. Well, no, you didn't. So what's interesting about this is because we're creating these synthetic worlds now, we can take this stuff, the missions that we've just flown in, and we can replay them exactly the same way on the ground to not just look at the overall macro training environment, but we can do really cool stuff like put ourselves right back in the cockpit now and start to understand not just where was the human being looking at a given point in time, where was the task focus, but what was the cognitive load that human being was under when they made the decision they made. And those micro data sets are critically important because those micro data sets on human performance build to macro data sets on overall squadron and wing and magic cone performance, so on and so forth. And so what does that mean? It means now we can start to begin to objectively measure readiness and lethality based on objective data sets that are built from the micro up to the macro and everything in between. And if you can measure and you can remove subjectivity, now the efficiencies you derive in terms of readiness are orders of magnitude that which is obvious by just replacing airplanes up there and all of the savings associated with that. That's where it gets into really cool stuff. And So as I think through this again, and as we think through it as a company, as we move forward into the future, we think about training and teaming and so on and so forth. I think there will be a shift away from, we should absolutely be protecting hours, but all hours should be relevant training. And there'll be a shift away from a focus on outright hours and one training syllabus fits all to it's really about, on a more sophisticated level, about a number of exposures to relevant problem sets within a given amount of resource. And our resources, time and money, really, right? And fuel, I guess. So if I, within an individual sortie, can get 6 looks at a problem set using ATARS rather than 3, I'm not saying you don't necessarily replace the hours, but now I'm saying you could start to, with objective data, start to look at a proficiency-based progression system of training. So you start to progress and move on when you are ready, not when you've completed every syllabus ride. And if you look at that across a broader set of samples, much like you, I'm sure, when I went through flying training in the UK way back in the day, it was really difficult, at the top end. And you'd be in training because the weather's so bad for 5 years by the time you get to the front line. But right at the end of that training, you'd see guys going into work on a Monday and by Friday, they'd be out of a job because they failed 1 or 2 rides and then they were cut because we run out of available resource, right? Well, now with objective data and proficiency-based, Paco, you're probably brilliant at BFM. I sucked at BFM. The data tells me that you're ready to go and progress in 3 rides. Whereas Dan here, who would previously have been cut because we don't have the resource to devote to me, I can take that pool of resource and devote it to me. And so the really exciting thing about this is I think both looking at individual progression, but also the collective, the efficiencies we can garner from the data that were provided in these synthetic worlds are orders of magnitude beyond that, which we even realize right now for the obvious, value of being able to replace physical assets and pilots up there. That's where I think this technology is going, and that's really what we're focused on.
Interesting that you mentioned that. It's one of my been on a kick of that lately. Competency-based training, objective analysis, and then data sets and aggregation over time, trend analysis, safety forecasting. Man, it's the data is so important.
Well, it's everything, yeah. Like the rat tasking stuff, we all know what it was like, right? You take a car and go fly 10 hours with fuel tanks on it. We're kidding ourselves.
Yeah.
So then you go, well, what does that actually mean for readiness and lethality? Like, if we're getting 100 hours now, but 50 of those are blue and 50 of those are red, what if I could give you 80, 90 hours of blue air and every day, every time you fly, it's blue air and it's an LFE or whatever it is you want to go train to? What does that mean? So I think we need to be more sophisticated than it's just about hours. It's really about exposures to relevant problem sets.
Having flashbacks. You always knew when you flew too much red air, when you, for those who don't understand how it works, like you show up to work, you go, I'm going to be the bad guy today, not the good guy, even though I'm flying all the good guy stuff. And so you have to convert your blue stuff into red analogous stuff, which means the numbers don't look the same. The ranges are different. Everything you do is slightly different. And so you have these replication criteria. What am I replicating? How do I most accurately replicate it? So the blue force can get the training for the day. You always know when you fly too much red air when you have memorized the threat rep. You don't have to go look it up before you step. You can know you flew too much red air. Like, all right, it's time to fly more blue. You should not be memorizing how to pretend you're the bad guy. You need to be training how to kill the bad guy.
Yeah, that's right. And the opportunity cost to that is enormous, right? To the layperson on the ground, you might think we're getting training, but it's not the case. And it means this is negative training as well. You're building negative habit patterns. And I think we need to be serious and really think through that. But to do that, you have to have objective data. And I think that's what's really exciting about the creation of these synthetic worlds.
Yeah. And all the way back to the beginning, there's a 120,000 sortie demand signal, and the deficit's probably 60,000 sorties a year just to achieve the readiness minimums that are mandated. This isn't like the sky high end readiness. This is minimum readiness requirements that the services have in writing, and that's how big the disconnect is for training and readiness, especially for the high end fight. So I really do appreciate what Red 6 is doing in the space. I'm a big fan for a long time. Really, really interesting to see what the next 12 to 24 months looks like, and from what you guys are going to be doing, especially with the F-16 and maybe whatever's next.
keep your eyes peeled. There's lots coming down the pipeline. It's a really exciting time to be at Red 6. Look, I put Red 6 to one side and just think about the technology. In my mind, I don't understand how people don't understand how valuable this technology is, right? And it's the natural sort of law of diffusion of innovation when you bring something in, right? It's difficult, but you're looking for those early adopters and everything to get behind it. But whether it's Red 6 that delivers this technology or someone else, in my view, it is absolutely inevitable. And the sooner we think about that and these idea of that we now have these training environments that allow us to train scale, frequency, relevancy, manned and unmanned together, the better for everyone, because we don't have a solution that's viable right now. And if we did, I'd be all ears, but I don't see one. So I think it's important.
Well said. Well said. And I'll give you the last thought, but before that, I'll give you my one last thought. Dan, been obviously following Red 6 for a while. You got 2 cockpits in your aircraft. So I still haven't been up.
You haven't? You should speak to the guys. Well, now we've done this. You've got my direct line. I would actually love to take you flying, and then maybe we could do another podcast after you've been and seen it. I always say, once you see this, you can't unsee it. And you realize it's I really encourage people to drop this idea that it's a within visual range tool and really think, because it is so much more than that. So if you're open to it, Paco, you want to come down, I'd love to take you flying for sure.
Done. You take me flying and we'll come back with a part 2 after post-flight. We'll do a post-flight. Okay. I love it. All right. Well, Dan, that's about all the time we have. I'll put a link to the homepage in the show notes. And what social media you guys mostly on? LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Robinson. I have an Instagram. I haven't been on in a long time. I've been taking a mental health break for the last 10 months or so. But Red 6 CEO is on Instagram. I'll be bringing it back up, but it's actually been a nice break from it, to be honest. But yeah, Red 6 CEO is a good one. And LinkedIn is best. We also have the website, of course.
Oh, one last thing. Sorry, and I have one reattack. You have your photo on the company's website. You have a wingman with you in your official photo.
Oh,
is he here?
Podcast of all time. LT, come here. Who's this? He's lazy. Hang on 1 second. Here he is. This is Lieutenant Petey. Right.
Lieutenant Petey.
This guy is briefed into everything. He's been to the Pentagon. He goes everywhere. Yeah, this is Lieutenant. He's the best.
For those of you who don't see the video, Dan has is that Labradoodle?
He's a miniature golden doodle.
Golden doodle.
Yeah.
They have an official photo together on the website. The CEO and the CEO's wingman there.
He's the chief morale officer of Red 6. I mean, he's very good at his job.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. That's all the time we have. And I'll be hitting you up for that flight, and we'll see you next time.
Let's do it. Thanks, Parker.